Welcome to Cambridge Summer Music Festival Online. My name is Freya Goldmark, I'm a violinist and I'm the director of Cambridge Summer Music Festival. Since having to cancel our 2020 festival, I've spent the last few months interviewing various artists that would have been performing. A little while ago I caught up with Mark. Mark's a conductor and a pianist, and he's also the founder of Faust Chamber Orchestra. We were really looking forward to having Faust Chamber Orchestra perform at our 2020 festival. They had a brilliant programme planned of a Haydn cello concerto with Guy Johnson, Beethoven's Eroica, and Wagner's Siegfried Idyll. Over Zoom, Mark and I had a wonderful chat where we discussed Wagner's Siegfried Idyll, what it's like to be a conductor, the story of Faust Chamber Orchestra, and a couple of other topics.
When you were programming for our finale of the festival, which was what you guys were going to be doing, why did you choose to put the Wagner in?
I suppose the question is really, why would you not put this in a concert? I mean, for me, it's one of my all-time favorite pieces. I think for the audience, it's a glorious sound world of E major to start with, skillfully handled. You just leave feeling uplifted, I think. And in the context of that particular concert, it was an interesting contrast to Beethoven's Eroica, which is really not about domestic bliss, whereas Wagner's piece is. And I was really excited to see how they would sit side by side. So I think this piece is all about the story of its composition, really. Wagner, at this point, was already a very established composer, but his personal life was in turmoil. He'd had one wife, Minna, who died in 1866, and shortly after her death, he fell in love with and married Cosima. At that point, Cosima von Bülow, who was married to conductor Hans von Bülow, and they'd had this tumultuous love affair, which, quite a long story, but it involved illegitimate children, one of whom, Isolde, was born at precisely the same time as the premiere of Tristan und Isolde. And this was really with the permission of Hans von Bülow. He allowed this illegitimate child to be named Isolde and as his daughter. Wow. Incredible patience. I think he must have recognized Wagner's brilliance as a musician. But anyway, it culminated in 1870 with this piece, Siegfried Idyll. And this was written just a few months after they had finally got married. Cosima had divorced Hans and, with his permission, married Wagner. They'd had, at this point, 3 illegitimate children. The final one, Siegfried, Wagner's son. And I think Wagner really wanted to pay tribute to this wonderful woman who had captured his heart and, in a way, opened up the compositional well a bit. He'd had a low point with The Ring, 12 years, in fact. He had written no further material of the Ring cycle. He'd got to halfway through Siegfried. And then Cosima came along, and he wrote this piece to be performed outside Cosima's bedroom on Christmas Eve, 1870, which was her birthday, at precisely 7 o'clock in the morning. And she woke up and heard these 13 instruments playing music, which was really a fusion of Wagner's own work. There were motifs from Siegfried. There were also little moments in the music which reflected their relationship. You can hear there's a sunrise, which, as far as we know, was something of great personal significance to them both. And I mean, there's so much in this music, but in short, it was a very personal tribute, and it was never really designed for public performance. Very intimate. And I think it was only about 7 or 8 years later that they had to publish it because they ran out of money, basically. So we're not supposed to have this piece.
No, we're not. No. What I was thinking this morning listening to it is that even though it's 150 years old, human emotion hasn't changed at all. You can totally feel that love, and it's like completely relevant to how you might feel today in a situation or towards someone. I love that, like the snapshot, how that part of us hasn't evolved. So much has changed in the world in 150 years, but that is you know, still.
Yeah, I think you couldn't put that any better, actually. This piece is love composed into music.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important because everyone thinks of Wagner as this composer of enormous epic dramas with gods, and their love is very different. It's epic. Whereas here, this is the only piece of music, really, where Wagner shows himself to be a human, a bit more like us.
Yeah, and perhaps vulnerable. Yeah,
exactly.
quite vulnerable, and yeah, it's definitely not what you expect. I mean, it makes me think as well, I wish he'd written more chamber music. It could have been so great. I mean, I would have loved to play more works like that by him. That would have been amazing.
Absolutely. I mean, there's this saying that I think Rossini is supposed to have said Wagner has wonderful moments and terrible quarters of hours. And yet this piece is a wonderful quarter of an hour, every single note. It's
Actually, interestingly, the length of it varies so much depending on who you listen to. And I was reading that it's now performed much slower than he intended it to be. I mean, whether that's true or not, I don't know. Maybe you know. Do you know anything about that?
No, I've spent quite a lot of time studying this score, actually. And from experience in performance, it does make a very large difference whether you have the single strings or you have a string section. So obviously Wagner intended just 1-2 apart. And it's a world away from most performances nowadays, which the conductor seems to pull around every single bar.
Yeah.
And I think actually Wagner probably intended something a bit more simple. It was played without a conductor the first time through. Yeah. So I don't know, you know the story about the trumpet.
Yes.
Richter was the conductor, but this time he was playing the trumpet. And this is almost a joke because the trumpet only plays about 8 or 10 bars, all in C major. He didn't actually play the trumpet. He'd learnt it specially, apparently in the middle of a field. He'd been sent out so no one else could hear. But he would have been right at the back, I presume, on the staircase. So this is very much a chamber work. And I think as a conductor, you have to respect that actually when you perform it.
Would you pick up the trumpet?
Well, actually, that would be quite authentic, wouldn't it? I mean, it plays the Siegfried motif. It's only about 5 notes of the scale. It's quite difficult. I've never conducted this and not had the trumpet player ask me, please, would you give me a cue? Because they sit for, I don't know, 250 bars, not playing. And just before they come in, the music modulates back from E major to C major. And it's not obvious when they should enter. So it takes guts, actually. And it has to be this proud, heroic Siegfried motif.
Yeah. What's your favourite bit of the whole piece?
I think, for me, the absolute golden moment of orchestration in this piece comes just at the start of the coda. We hear the string quintet. They return to the opening, which contains this immortal beloved motif, Wagner's tribute to Cosima and originally Brunhilde. And then just when you think that's perfect, comes along something even more wonderful. The clarinet has what is for me, I think, the most beautiful descending scale in all of music. Just a simple E major scale starting high and falling on top of these strings. And you'll never forget when you hear this for the first time.
Where do you stand on pieces that didn't have a conductor initially when they were first performed, and now people stand in front? What's your view on that as a conductor?
I tend towards the self-effacing, actually. I think in a way almost all pieces the conductor is I think it's wonderful if people can listen to the music without watching a conductor. And sometimes a conductor is there to to just save a bit of time. I mean, I appreciate I'm in the minority amongst my colleagues about this, but I think there are almost no pieces written before 1900 where if you had huge hours of rehearsal time, you couldn't play them without a conductor. It's just that now we have to do a concert in 3 hours with a Tchaikovsky symphony, where you just have to have someone who can hear the balance immediately and can make key decisions. But I always do Mozart with no baton, for instance, because I think, well, the baton was not in use really in Mozart's time, and you can be more helpful, I think, with your hands, just showing a few things, whereas a baton immediately creates sort of a sense of control, which I think is not needed in that music.
Yeah, I think something that a lot of concert goers don't realize, especially in this country, is that when you go and see kind of a standard orchestral concert in London, say with a overture and then a concerto and then a symphony, they don't realize how little rehearsal time there's been. When I've explained that to people, they've been so shocked to think, well, you did 3 hours or maybe a bit the day before, and you don't appreciate it if you're watching a concert.
There's this sort of ecosystem, I think, of players who all know the music so well, and efficient conductors and good managers, and it all comes together. And of course, the composers from the past wouldn't recognize this at all, because they were used to hours and hours of rehearsal, and sometimes even then mediocre performances. I think Tristan Isolde is obviously a special case, but I think, I was studying this recently, I think they had about 70 rehearsals with the orchestra. Wow. And then after that, they abandoned it because they decided it was just too difficult. And then it took another few years before it was finally performed for the first time. And yet nowadays, I mean, the orchestra at Covent Garden, they would get that ready in 4 or 5 sessions, and they could already do a performance. I mean, it's extraordinary. Yeah,
that is amazing. I'm not sure which way is the best way. Maybe something down the middle would be nice.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, that's why actually orchestras without conductors are great, because it forces you to have more time. And I've never heard an unconducted performance that hasn't felt driven and energized. It's almost just, it doesn't work otherwise. You know, every player has to know what they're doing.
It definitely forces musicians to not be lazy, right? When there's not a conductor there, you should be responsible for what you're playing all the time anyway, but it definitely forces people who might switch off a little bit to really, really concentrate. It does make that energy. But I think that's also just connecting with the people you're playing with, like why I find chamber music so exciting, because there's someone right next to you that you don't know what they're about to throw at you, and you can throw something back, and it's unique every time. In Cambridge, and where did you study?
So I studied modern languages at Keyes College in Cambridge. I did both a bachelor and then also a master's there, but I did spend a lot of my time doing music. I was very lucky that my director of studies had a sympathetic view of my music making, and the odd essay may have appeared quite late while I was conducting. Actually, the most ludicrous thing I did there was I conducted Don Giovanni, and I would say almost all of the cast and also the director and myself are all now working as professionals doing a lot of opera, so that was a wonderful starting point.
I think that's such a wonderful thing about Cambridge as a university, is that there is so much music, and a lot of really great musicians choose to go there before going to conservatoire, or even instead of going to conservatoire, and you get possibly a even more rounded, view of the world by doing that than just going to music college, perhaps.
I think so. I mean, for me, it was definitely a good thing. I think as a conductor, you need to have a very broad cultural background as well as a musical skills. Yeah. So I think, and I work a lot in opera as well, and there to have languages is really essential. So I profited a lot.
Did you know then that you wanted to be a conductor?
I think I knew at some level. I think it became totally clear to me during my time at Cambridge, actually.
Mm-hmm.
I do remember a moment, sort of a slightly odd awakening moment, but I remember a moment in the library where I was trying to find a book, and it was incredibly dry book, an analysis of some literary text. And I just remember thinking, actually, this is too sort of dusty for me. And I realized then that what I really valued was that performance aspect of music, of bringing it alive. I did want to study it and know about it, but it was really the chance to actually perform it for and with other people that really mattered.
Yeah, that's what music's for, isn't it? For sharing with people.
And that's been shown so much recently, actually.
We're
crying out for these shared experiences.
Yeah, we really are, definitely. And so did you go to academy after?
That's right. So I did my time at Cambridge, and then I went to the Royal Academy to study piano accompaniment. I had a wonderful time there, also working across several departments, actually, a lot of time in the opera department, conducting classes, and working with singers, which was the first time I'd really worked with singers properly, and that's a whole new experience. Now I love it, but to start with, it's a steep learning curve.
You conduct Faust Chamber Orchestra. When did you start that?
I think it was while I was a student at the academy that I started the orchestra. There were a group of us musicians, all in the same situation, really. We were studying, we wanted playing opportunities, and I knew as a conductor, you really have to forge your own path and make your opportunities. So we got together, we found somewhere to rehearse, somewhere to perform, tried to persuade some audience to come. And we were very lucky, actually. We had cellist Guy Johnson at our first concert, played, I think it was one of the Haydn concertos, and we did, I think we did Beethoven Symphony No. 4. It was a very echoey church, I remember, which in hindsight wasn't ideal. But anyway, since then, we have grown and grown, and we're now a fully fledged professional chamber orchestra. A lot of hard work, and we don't, in a sense, what we really value is great performances with wonderful musicians. So we don't do huge tours and like some orchestras. We tend to have a lot of chamber musicians in the orchestra, and we come together a few times a year, and we all love it. And there's never a sense that everyone's just doing it for the fee, as it can just sometimes happen with big orchestras.
And you do a chamber series as well alongside, is that right?
Yes, it's very important to us that chamber music is really the ethos behind everything. So we have a series where we have players from the orchestra. We also have guest artists. We're fortunate to have a beautiful stately home where we can perform. And also for me, actually, as a pianist, to be able to play sonatas with the principal members of the orchestra is even better, because it makes me feel like I'm doing something. So often as a conductor, you wave your arms and you get to the end and you think, what have I really done there? But you can't deny when you play a big sonata that you've made some real music.
We're super excited that you're coming back, and Faust Chamber Orchestra is coming back next year to Cambridge. And
we're very excited too.
I think between us, we've come up with a brilliant program for our opening day. It's going to be really exciting, I think.
Yeah, I can't wait.
I really hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, you can head over to our website where we've got a whole virtual festival full of lots of great performances. Please consider donating so that we can continue to bring great music to Cambridge for the years to come.